they're affected by the weather conditions, some of them down south, maybe.
Could be, could be. Patricia probably is, because the Jacksonville had some power outages, so she might
Right.
be affected by that.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Okay. Well, I'll throw it open if you got anything you want to talk about.
Yeah, I really, where God's got me right now is really trying to understand the seat of rest.
Yeah.
And really how to, I love rest when it comes to just passively enjoying Him. But there's a seat of rest of the government that I'm still learning. I have a lot to learn there of how to govern from that posture of rest.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've got anything to lend there. That's just really where He has me camped. Is I tell you, Mike, I see it so clearly, the ease and the invitation that He's invited us into of the governance of His kingdom. I see it so clearly, and it's bigger than anything we can even fathom, or at least I can even fathom. But there's just that that wrestle with the flesh and the mind that I'm right there. God's helping me. I get glimpses of what's available, and the ease of it is just mind-boggling. And it really is, does offend our intellect. And it's just, I want it. So anything you've got to lend there would be amazing.
Okay. Well, I think my journey towards the seat of rest in government, in a sense, I found that was in my own heart, within my spirit. I learned to invite the Father to be on that seat of rest in government in me, and then I'm in Him, and He's teaching me in sonship to see His government outworked in my life. So it started within my spirit as a choice of surrender. And in that process, then, just choosing, making the choice, I'm going to surrender. I surrender. I choose to surrender. I choose to give up the seat of rest and government in me to you, so that I can be in you and you can teach me to come from a place of rest in that government of my own life, but also, obviously in the kingdom government of the realms of heaven. And so I chose to do it, make a point of doing it, and I do it every day. I mean, I surrender the seat of rest and government within my spirit to the Father every day, and engage, because I then trust Him. He's my provider. He's my protector. He's my healer. He's the Lord. All those amazing names that describe who He is. That's who I engage with, and I put my trust. So then I've got to say, oh, well, therefore I'm not going to do any of those things myself. Well, that didn't just happen. Obviously, I'm going to choose not to, but then choosing not to and not doing it are two totally things. So my spirit was saying, hey, here's the place of surrender. But my soul was like, what are we going to do? And how are we going to do it? And when are we going to do it? And it's just like, we've surrendered. Yeah, we're trusting in the Father. Well, that's all good in theory, but in practice, we need to put in provisions. We need to make sure there's safety nets there. We need to make sure we're able to look after ourselves just in case. So there was a sort of whole of this type of, what my desire was and what my spirit really knows is very different from obviously the practical outworking of that in my soul and through my soul. And, therefore, at this point in time, my soul was basically engaging. It was still, I needed to engage. It's my soul needed to know, needed to understand, needed to be able to figure it out. And even if there was things that God was doing, I still needed to be aware, and he needed to tell me what He was doing, because if He didn't tell me, then I wouldn't know. And if I didn't know, then I wasn't going to trust him. You know, and I didn't know that. I didn't know that's what I was doing. But basically, he took me through a process. And in all that, I was having amazing encounters and engaging heaven every day. But it was always, I'm going into heaven, I'm coming back out of heaven, I'm going into heaven, I'm coming back out of heaven. I go in there, amazing things, do this, do that, make some declarations, come back out and try and work them out. So I wasn't flowing from heaven because I couldn't be in that place of heaven at the same time as being on earth, because my soul wouldn't let me. You know, that was the process I went through. And I'd been through inner healing over years. You know, I dealt with forgiveness issues. You know, it wasn't so much as, you know, those type of inner hurts or areas of dark, that really wasn't the issue. The issue was control. You know, who was in charge here? And in my soul, God made me a particular way. He wired me a particular personality type. And, you know, I'm wired to figure things out. You know, I want to understand, you know, I want to see how the world works. I want to then explain it to people and so they can understand. So I'm geared up that way, you know, but I was using it. I was using the way he made me to give me my identity and keep myself safe from the soul perspective. And I listened to Ian Clayton's teaching on separation of the soul and spirit. I just didn't get it. You know, I didn't get it. I didn't relate to his analogies of, you know, taking an axe and driving it through pieces of wood and splitting them open. It just didn't, it didn't relate. And I realized, yes. But then I thought, well, I don't want my soul separated from my spirit. It's like I'm supposed to be one. But I didn't get the sort of the journey really that I was in. I didn't understand it from that perspective. And we're all different, of course. So God relates to us differently in different ways. So I began, I suppose this Father started to, you know, bring me to a point where I would be able to come to that place of surrender, or the soul surrender. So I didn't need to know anymore. And it was quite a challenging journey. I mean, I remember I think it was November 2010, I saw this vision picture sort of thing. I was in worship and I saw this, like this nebula, you know, this beautiful sort of space scene, I guess. And emerging from it was like my scroll, you know, and I saw it's like open to this page. And I'm looking at it thinking, wow. And I see this sort of blue light and I'm just thinking, wow, what's this? You know, and I had this sense that this was a very significant point on my journey. And I didn't know what it meant. I just knew, and I felt everything's leading me up to this point. And this is going to be the most significant point, in a sense that then everything's going to be different. And I instinctively knew that this is what it meant. But I was thinking, wow, I'm going to have some amazing encounters. This is going to be brilliant. You know, I really thought it was as great. And that was 2010, November. So in January 2012, I start asking God, well, how? You know, how's this going to happen? You know, I want this. If this is something on my scroll, when's it going to be? How do I get it? You know, and I started asking him questions, and I started to, I guess, the desire for whatever he was going to do began to build in me, and my willingness to participate in it started to increase, even though I didn't know what it was, because I thought it was going to be really good. You know, this is going to be great. So I began to, from January 2011 to May 2011, I started to pursue this, meditate in it, seek God for it, begin to pursue him, I guess. And I started sort of making, you know, declarations of my, you know, undying obedience and willingness to do anything. You know, search me, oh God. You know, I started to feel it's like, hey, there must be something which is hindering this in some way. So I started to decree and declare and begin to, I guess, prepare whatever it takes. I'm willing, you know. And you say things like that, and then when they start to happen, you know, you think, oh, I didn't sign up for that. Well, you did, you said it, you know. And I remember saying things that were really like, hey, anything, I'll do anything, you know, not really thinking that God was going to really make me do something I didn't like, you know, but hey, I said it. So I was doing a lot of sort of preparing for transformation, I guess, by making myself open and vulnerable and things like that. And then, you know, I remember having some encounters later on in 2011, which were within a dark cloud. You know, it was like I was in worship and all of a sudden I'm in this dark cloud, like so thick that I'm trying to find my way through it, not frightened in any way, realizing that, hey, you know, God, I know God dwells within a dark cloud in his person so that we're all safe. But I thought, oh, great, how do I get to God? You know, and I started to I think 2 or 3 weeks I had encounters that were like that. You know, and I think at this point of time, I also went through the sort of the marriage preparation within my own life with God. So I went through the dance floor and the soaking room in the garden, the sort of the intimacy that was encounter based rather than experience, like in cognitive based. I encountered a lot, but I didn't really know exactly what was going on. I just knew it was really good. And so I would dance with God on the dance floor, and it was always on the white squares of the dance floor, because the dance floor was like a big checkerboard of black and white squares, always on the right squares. I never went into the dark squares, you know. And I thought, oh, okay, that's great, you know. And I never really thought about that because I just enjoyed the experience. Started to, again, the soaking, you know, of soaking preparation. You know, a lot of it was, I was experiencing it, not really knowing what it was doing, but it was softening me up, really. I mean, that was really what it was doing. God was softening me up without me really knowing exactly what he was going to do. Because if I knew exactly what he was going to do, I would have tried to figure out how to do it without the softening up process. So eventually I produced my ketubah. That sort of, hey, here's my marriage contract, you know, here's, you know, and I had the wrong idea about it, in a sense. I think it was sort of, I was not seeing it from the relational perspective of, hey, my part in this relationship is to be me and your part is to be you. So it was almost like, hey, here's all the amazing things that you're going to do for me to enable me fulfill my destiny. You know, so there was 68 points on it, you know, as thorough I could possibly get it, you know, as broad as I could make it, you know. And it was like, I produced it, and then it was like, okay, now what? You know, and then the sort of the dark clouds things started to happen. And then I get to this point where then late, I think October 2012, 11, I think it was 2011, I have this sort of invitation to give 4 months to God. So it's like, you know, give me 4 months. I want you in your time with me to spend 4 months just coming. And he didn't say what it was going to be. He just said, I want to give you 4 months. I thought, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And I then started to think, oh, okay, maybe he's going to take me through the garden and the dance floor and the soaking room, and then we're going to have this, you know, bridal chamber experience, and I'm going to be brought into a whole new level of intimacy and relationship. And I started imagining what might happen, you know, sort of with all these wonderful thoughts of these amazing things that were going to happen as I was going to go through this period. So I was really excited about it, you know. And so November 2011 comes, and 1st of November, that's when I started. And I thought, great, this is the first week. So I'm going to be December, January, February. And God dropped into my heart that the 20th of February was going to be the day of breakthrough. So I'm like, oh, great, I've got a date. This is going to be good, you know. So, and so I had these sort of like, I guess, highfalutin ideas of what it was going to be like, thinking, wow, when I did a 40-day fast, it was amazing. Now I'm going to do 4 months of engaging, and it's going to be awesome, you know. So I get to the first day, and you know, nothing, you know, just black, can't see a thing, can't hear a thing. And I'm like, God, what's going on? You promised And then I thought, oh, I don't exactly know what he promised, but it must be something good. So something's going on. And all I heard him say was, be still, be still. And I love being still until he said, be still. And then my soul couldn't be still because my soul needed to understand why I needed to be still, what was going on while I'm being still. How does being still do anything? And every question that could have arisen for my need to understand and know arose. And my soul now was exposed. So I'd said to God, hey, do everything, do anything. I'm open. And now he did. And it wasn't like I thought he was going to do. So I'm like annoyed, really. I had a bad attitude, and it was like, my soul. And it's just sort of, but my soul at this point was in control. My spirit just had no power. It was really weird because my spirit had just been amazingly encountering God for 15 months in heaven every day. And now it couldn't do anything because my soul was just allowed to be in charge, to show me what it's like to be in charge. So for that whole month, it was, terrible. My soul just couldn't be still, wanted to know, desperately needed to know everything, and question upon question upon question. And I'm seeing nothing, I'm hearing anything. All it is be still. So I'm like, I didn't sign up for this. But God didn't even tell me that I did. I just couldn't fathom what was going on. But because I had this deposit of 15 months worth of encounters with God, I carried on speaking, preparing things, doing things. No one would have known what was going on in my own personal time because it was with me and God. And I didn't tell anybody. I just carried on. Everyone would have thought everything was normal. But I was going through this intensely difficult period in which everything was dark and black, and my soul just was now, it was like uncontrolled. It had no leashes on it directed towards God and my need for my identity. I need to know, and I didn't. This month was just so bad that I didn't really have any idea of what was going on. So I thought 1st of December, it's like, it's going to be different. Maybe this was just the first month. 1st of December comes, no change. And it's like, God, what are you doing? And all I heard him say was, wait. Well, why do I need to wait? What am I waiting for? How long do I need to wait? Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, yakky, 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 yak. And it was like, nothing, no reply, nothing. And at this point, I was, at this point, I was sort of like, I was getting fed up with it. And I was like, okay, I give up. I got to the point 2 weeks into this month, I just thought, I give up. It's like, this is whatever this is, I give up. I give up. I don't need to know. It's like, I'm never asking you another question again. I mean, I was just like, I still didn't have a good attitude, but I got to the point of the end of my soul's questioning came to an end. And I just waited. I just waited. So, okay, well, if you want me to wait, I'll put my feet up and I'll wait. So I'll just get up like I normally do. I'll go and I'll sit in my chair and I'll put my feet up and I'll just wait. And nothing, I guess deep down I was hoping that would make something different happen, but it didn't. It just, nothing happened. So, but I was really at the end of, my soul had sort of blown itself out, really. I'd stormed for 6 weeks towards God like a hurricane, and I blew myself out. I had nothing left to complain about or to ask about. I just surrendered. It was like, that's it. And during this thing, it's like as I was asking God, I do remember him saying one thing, you know, like, what are you doing? Or what is this? And one of the things he said was, you know, I think, I don't need your assistance. I need your surrender. I think that was the impression I got. I don't need your assistance. I need your surrender. So eventually, you know, the next month, rest. So I'm like, okay, that's all I'll do. I'll just rest. You know, I will, you know, I didn't ask what it meant to rest. I just, okay, I'll just rest, you know, and all this, you know, what it was doing was getting me to the point where I was open to the separation of my soul from spirit in its control. Because every time I went into heaven, I went in soul and spirit, had amazing encounters, and then stepped back out. You know, my soul wouldn't let my spirit stay there. I couldn't live in both places at once. I was limited. God wanted to unveil things and take me into a governmental perspective, an understanding of this actual place where I'm seated in a governmental place in heaven and have access to the courts of heaven. I wasn't operating at that level, because if I did, I would have operated in that level through my soul, and it would have given me even more identity from what I was doing from that, which God didn't allow. So I knew about various things. I'd seen various things, but I wasn't functioning in it because I kept having to step back out of heaven. And then I would do my best to try and work out what I'd done there here without any flow from there through me, because my soul wouldn't let it. You know, although all the gateways were open and everything was flowing, and I'd already done a lot of preparation on gateways in my life and all that stuff, this was the core issue, was, you know, this was my core identity, and was I willing to surrender it? You know, rather than, if I do things, then that will affirm my identity. So my whole soul went through this process, and you know, eventually I get to the last month, and it was like, wait expectantly. Now I had to, this was February, so I had the 20th of February as a date, and I felt that I needed to fast. So I'm going to fast for these 21 days, you know, and I was able to sort of shut myself away and fast. And so I started to review 18 months worth of journals, and just started to wait with expectancy for the things that I'd seen and how those things could come about and everything. And, you know, and I sort of had the dark cloud, and I want to see the face of God, and I want to engage him in a totally different level, you know, but I had to come to an end of me, ego, whatever you want to call it, but the soul having its own separate identity from who God made it to be, but independently, you know. So, you know, what I was really coming to the point was, you know, do you trust me? I mean, that's what God was really saying. Do you trust me when you don't know? Do you trust me when you can't see? Do you trust me when you can't hear? Do you trust me when you don't understand what I'm doing? Do you trust me? Do you trust me at all? You know, and of course I would have said, of course I trust you. But this showed that I didn't unless I knew. So that was sort of dealing with this whole, how he made me to be, to get to the point of soul total surrender. And then 5 days into this fast, and I'm just waiting expectantly, reviewing all the things, you know, my ketubah and everything. And then I felt to burn it. I felt I need to offer this ketubah. It's just like, you know, and it struck me, you know, you wouldn't use your marriage vows to reinforce your relationship by demand. You know, your marriage vows are the things that you live out of with the desire to be a good husband or be a good wife, or all the things you've said, loving one another. So I thought, okay, I'm going to offer this. I'm going to offer it up. So I offered it up, burnt it, you know, actually physically burnt it. And then I got ill. You know, I actually, I was fasting with just water, and I was using a water cooler that I hadn't cleaned out properly. So I got ill. So I poisoned myself with bad water. So all of a sudden it's like, I'm sort of, I don't know, I think it was like 8 days into this fast, and I get ill and I can't keep anything, no water down. So I'm really physically, you know, my wife could, like, you know, she heard me urging and everything. So she's like, you need to call the doctor, or you need to whatever. I said, no, I'm okay. You know, I wasn't okay. I was terrible. But I said, no, this is obviously part of what I need to go through. And, you know, so I got physically totally at the end of myself, you know. And so after about another week, it's just like I was totally without strength. I had nothing left. And then emotionally, I started to feel like waves of things were going over me. It's like Psalm, you know, in the Psalms, it's like, you know, my God, why have you forsaken me? And it was just like, you know, I'm just feeling emotionally bereft. There's nothing. I've got nothing, you know, no strength physically, no strength emotionally. And I started to feel that I'd surrendered this ketubah, and God was saying, okay, you need to now realize what it means to surrender everything. So every one of the 68 points just died. And I grieved. And emotionally, I was grieving as if these things would never, ever be fulfilled ever. Like, that's what it felt like. This had died, and emotionally, each one of those was like a death. Oh, it was just, oh, so hard emotionally. Because these were things which were part of my role. They were part of my destiny. It was just like, but they're going to have to die. But they were dying to my soul, because they weren't going to give me identity. So it was irrelevant whether I did them or not did them to who I was. And it was irrelevant to whether I saw God any differently. So did I trust him? Could I trust him? Well, what happens if I never did any of these things? And then it was like, what happens if God never does any of these things for you? So it was a huge emotional grieving process, physically, emotionally. And then my spirit, just like, I didn't even have the strength to pray in tongues. It was just like, I had nothing, absolutely nothing left, totally nothing left. It was like, you know, seriously, this was actual death in giving up, surrendering. You know, I just didn't care anymore whether I knew anything, didn't know anything. It was just irrelevant. It just became, I'd so given up the need to any of these things that I came to that point where that was it. Everything, you know, had come to the end. And it was like my soul separated from my spirit, in that the independence of my soul died. It's like there was no independence left. You know, I didn't want any independence. I mean, it was just like death to being independent and the DIY tree. I mean, I didn't know it was, you know, I didn't think about it as a DIY tree, but that's literally what it was. I am not going to do it myself anymore. My identity is not going to come from myself anymore. You know, none of that is going to be from me anymore. And it was a hugely intensive experience. That particularly, that last, you know, the last, you know, 20 days was just, completely, you know, bringing me to an end of everything. And then I got to, you know, the 20th, you know, the 19th. I remember the 19th of February, thinking, okay, you said tomorrow is going to be a breakthrough day, so I'm waiting expectantly for whatever you want to do, and I don't care what you do. You know, it's like, you know, it doesn't matter anymore. It's like, I know that you love me. I know that I love you. I know it's nothing to do with what you do or what I do. Everything of that is just ended. And then I woke up on the 20th and I was totally normal. Like absolutely everything, physically, emotionally, spiritually, everything had just changed. And I engaged heaven and my spirit stayed there. And it's never come out since, you know, but I was totally integrated with my soul and spirit. And I've never felt more one, more whole, more flowing. It was now, heaven was flowing like a stream, and my heart was just open for this flow. You know, there was my relationship with God changed in that it became so much more intimate because there were no demands on it. And then all the things that God wouldn't show me when I wanted him to show me, now I didn't want him or didn't need him to show me, he was free to show me. So all of a sudden, all the courts of heaven and the dimensions of heaven opened up. And so the relationship and the place of rest I was in, totally trusting God, not needing to do anything, then he then opened up all the things that my destiny would lead me into. But the way I did them totally changed. You know, I didn't need to understand it anymore. I just needed to flow. And therefore heaven started to flow. What my spirit was living in that realm and being in that realm began to just flow into this realm, you know. And that's when, you know, this was, you know, February 2012. Then God started to prepare me governmentally in terms of understanding the courts, engaging in the courts. I then began to engage with wisdom. Wisdom then started to take me and show me the different realms of heaven, how things worked, all the different courts, you know, the court of kings and all the legislative stuff all started to flow out of that. You know, then I was able to go back into the heart of God in eternity. I was able then to engage the four faces of God. I never did that before that. It's like I'd engaged the ark, you know, but I was engaging with what was in the ark. You know, I wanted the mandate to do, because doing would give me a reaffirmation of my identity. So it was all about doing, you know. So, you know, my whole experiences all went to another level and then to another level. I went back to the Firestones that I first encountered in 2008. And I went back there and it was a totally different level. And I went back again and again, and it went to a deeper level and a deeper level. So everything took on a whole different perspective. And then everything started to flow. You know, it just, everything was different. You know, I just didn't need to know anymore. You know, I didn't need to understand anymore. And therefore, God was opening up revelation and things way, way beyond anything that was possible before. So it's like the very core of my being gave up, surrendered, died to needing to be in control, and then was reintegrated with my spirit. Because I didn't get that from the Ian Clayton thing. It was like, no, soul and spirit separated, but I didn't get any integration from it. So I didn't really get it. But now I felt totally integrated, flowing one to the other. So what I was resonating with in heaven, with my spirit, instantly I was resonating with within my soul, and my soul and spirit just were in agreement, in cooperation. And that was the place of rest that enabled government to come out of relationship. Otherwise, before, it would have been government would have been coming to establish something, and I would have been governing in the understanding of my soul rather than in the flow of the spirit. So I was able to go back into the heart of God outside of time and space. And I didn't try and understand it. I didn't go with my cognitive, I want to understand what it's like to be here. I just went to be. So everything became a being rather than a doing, which meant all the doing just flowed from being. But it was obviously a pretty intense period that God just softened me up, and my spirit, because my spirit was strong, was the desire was, hey, I'll want whatever it takes, God, you know. But then when it was whatever it takes took place, it was like, oh, devastation to my soul. But ultimately I would go through it again in an instant, because it was totally the point where it was like I saw on this scroll. Everything led up to this point, and now everything was just, I couldn't see anything after that point, because I would have never been able to imagine it, because I would have been seeing it through the perspective of what I already knew. And now I was experiencing it, and everything was different, you know. And then that has then led on to, you know, deeper and deeper transformation and change, because my soul now is just not fighting, it's not arguing, it's not in any way separated. So this quantum entanglement between soul and spirit, between dimensions, and being a gateway of heaven to flow, just became, you know, even more of an increase, because now there was a flow from heaven. Well, where did it need to go? It needed to flow through me like rivers of living water, because up to that point it was flowing in me, but needed to flow through me. So then the whole perception of the world took a different view. And me being a son, and sonship being the answer to creation's groan, that began to come. You know, I remember around this period, God took me out to a black hole, and I felt this sound, this deep groan, and I'm like, whoa, you know. And so God took me out into the solar system and showed me the world, and it changed my whole willingness to pursue the things of God without having to figure out how to do it. You know, sometimes it was like, I couldn't, how do I do that? And it was just like, okay, well, God, yes, if you say. I can't do it, but I'm willing to say yes to you. So whatever will happen needs to happen. And I became much more relaxed. You know, I became actually feeling at rest, knowing that I'm whole was the outworking of this, which meant, you know, when God then said in 2013, I want you to reach out to people, I'm like, don't know how, can't really see how, but okay, you know, if you say, you know, and it was, you know, no more than, hey, okay, yeah, I'll agree, you know, if that's something, don't know how, but then it's like, okay, well, go into the strategy room of heaven, and well, here's how, do this. Oh, you know. And in 2012, some guy who I don't know whether we started blogging things in 2012, possibly, but someone contacted me and said, well, can I ask you some questions? I think they emailed me. I think we may have put a website up or something at that point, and I think I probably shared sort of some things online a little bit. Well, I didn't, someone else did it for me, Jeremy. And someone contacted me and said, well, can I ask you some questions? And he said, look, if I was to make a forum online, would you be happy if I invited some people to come and talk to you in this forum, just ask you questions? And I was like, yeah, sure. You know, and so for about, I guess, sort of 12 months or so, I just answered people's questions, you know. And there were probably 13, 14 people that I were connecting to, just questions. I never met them. You know, it was just, they asked me things and I shared whatever flowed. And then when God said to reach out to people, well, I don't really know anybody, you know, really. I mean, I think 2011 we'd had Ian Clayton here, and 2012 we had Ian Clayton here. We did a conference with him, so I'd met a few people, but I didn't really know anybody. So he said, well, just ask those that you know. So I put out this thing to this 13 people, 14 people, said, look, God has asked me to make contact with people in a more direct way, to actually mentor and be part of a face-to-face engaging with people. And at this point in time, I discovered Google Hangouts, and hey, you could actually connect up with people and see each other, at that point. And I think 3 people said yes. 3 people of that 14 said, yeah, we could connect up. And that's how it started, really. But all that was preparing for this by bringing me to a point where, I was separated and reintegrated, and the capacity that I have just exponentially increased, because heaven's resource is flowing, because I couldn't have done or do what I do within the power of the soul, But as I then came from that place of rest, it's like nothing became impossible. When God said, well, I want you to meet another group of people, it's just like, oh, okay, how's that going to work? And then God said to me, I want you to connect with people on Facebook. And I'm like, oh, I'm not doing that. I hate Facebook. I really don't want to do it. But I thought, he said, well, that's how I'm going to connect you with people, so you need to do it. So I thought, oh, all right. So, that sort of was the next step. And then the people I was connecting to were in the US. There was a couple in Atlanta who knew each other, and someone up in Maryland who, I sort of connected up, and still connect up with them, and the next step of that preparation, and this is how God uses things, he said, well, I want you to contact people in the UK, not just in the US. So I thought, okay, oh, well, I'll email a few people who we've got, because we've done a conference. So then we've got some email addresses. So I emailed a few and said, well, does anyone want to get together to just see what's going on around the country? And hey, let's hang out and see what God wants to do. And I think 10 or 11 people said, yeah, we'd like to do that. Fixed up a time, started to call people, didn't work. 2 people turned up, because the rest couldn't get in, and they were waiting, couldn't get in. And that was the first time that I recorded a hangout, because that was when I realized you could actually do records, and it would actually put it onto YouTube, but I didn't. I just thought, well, I'll practice this, because hey, this is an opportunity maybe. So I practiced it. No one turned up, so I ended up sharing my testimony of how I saw in the spirit. So I shared it. The people who think, well, can we hear it again, and can you post it to the people who didn't see it get in? And then they came back and saw it and said, well, can you post it publicly? Well, that's what opened up then the avenue to connect with people via the YouTube videos and things like that, because God has it all planned when you give up and allow him to direct it and just say yes, from a place of rest where you don't have to know how to do it. You just have to say yes and trust him and walk it out relationally. So I can see that everyone has different encounters, but the key is getting to that point where there is that point of total surrender, where there is a separation, but there's a reintegration. There's a wholeness that comes, that you then don't have to figure it out. You don't have to, now other people, they're different than me. So other people have different ways. So I knew that this was provoked by my going through this marriage preparation thing with God, and he would not allow me to teach that stuff for another 4 years, because people here wouldn't have been ready for it. They would have not been able to go through what I went through, or their equivalents, without 4 years of preparation. So being a forerunner, I guess, you go through things, prepare those things, and then release them. And eventually, when I did release it, I warned everybody. I said, look, if you do this ketubah and you're willing to go through this marriage process, there is going to be a consummation. There is going to be a point where God holds you to account for this marriage relationship in which you're saying, I do to God. And you're saying, I do to everything he says, So it's just like, be prepared and do, oh, yeah. And I knew they weren't taking it seriously as they should have done until one or two of them started to hit their own dark cloud. And one or two of them started to find that God was removing their redemptive gift ability to do what they were doing. And so their identity was being challenged in terms of what they did. So rulers couldn't rule. Servants couldn't serve. I mean, people started to find God started to stretch them to the point of their surrender, and it's different for everyone of the details, but the principles basically, I think, the same. Bring us to that point where that's it. I give up. I totally surrender, And that's not to say that your soul is perfect. There's still processes of things, but it's so much easier because the soul cooperates much easier. When my spirit shows me something in my soul that needs dealing with, I don't fight and argue. It's just like there's a surrender. It's just like, yeah, So, the deconstruction of my mind that went on last year would never have been possible without this happening. And then going through years of continual sort of growth and deeper relationship of intimacy, where the intimacy and the encounters of intimacy challenged my beliefs. They challenged my mind, So my soul gave up, but it didn't mean that it still wasn't framed by belief systems that needed dealing with. I just was cooperating with dealing with them, until like then, a year or so ago, having, God spoke to me in the beginning of 2016 to say, I want you to commit to legislation, to engaging legislatively every day. Just now, that was a challenge because it was like, oh, so this is very specific, and it isn't just engaging and intimacy and relationship and the usual things I was doing. This was, no, you're going to produce legislation, which is going to be key. So one of the first pieces of legislation was about removing restrictions on the mind. No, I wasn't thinking that would apply to me. I really wasn't. It was just like, I could think of lots of people it did apply to. So I thought, oh, great. There's a law here to see restrictions removed. So as I started decreeing this law and using this law for declarations, God used my own words to give himself permission to deconstruct and remove the restrictions that I didn't even know I had on my mind, which then went into the deconstruction of my thinking, belief systems, so much, of my 9 pillars of framework around my thinking, which determined how I interpreted things and saw things, and and when those things got demolished or started to get shaken and pulled down, it was like, whoa, all of a sudden I realized just how much I was restricted and framed by believing assumptions and presumptions. And that's the process of going through dealing with how I was still presuming what I thought about God and leaning to what I thought about God. So he showed me this beautiful tapestry, and we were standing in front of this beautiful tapestry. I was standing looking at it, and it was this tapestry of God woven with lots of my encounters with him. I'm looking at it thinking, wow, this is amazing, and thinking, wow, are you inviting me into this or whatever? And I saw this little thread, and I pulled the thread, and it just unraveled the whole thing. And behind it, God was looking with a smiling and laughing, saying, you thought you were looking at me, and what you were looking at was how your mind has constructed me from these encounters that we've been having. Well, that was a serious challenge. And all of a sudden it's just like, oh my word, I've been looking at an image of you constructed from these amazing encounters, but it still wasn't really you. Now, as soon as I was looking at him face to face, things really started to change at a strong pace, really, because now I could see reflected back the true image of who I was in him, without having to lean to my own understanding of what I framed, So it was a long journey, but one well worth taking. So, how do you come from a place of cease and rest? I think it is getting to that point of total surrender. I mean, desire is the starting point. I desired it because every day my spirit would, yield the place of seat and rest of my own life to him, to the Father, so he could father me. It's just, the Father knows what we need, and it's not always what we want or what we like, but it's what we need, and therefore he promises to meet all my needs if I seek his kingdom. And I'm saying, I seek your kingdom. You're on the throne of my life. So he says, okay, well, you've turned over the throne of your life to me, so I'm going to meet your needs. Well, I didn't know I needed a deconstructed mind. So I didn't know I needed to go through a dark cloud. I didn't know I needed to surrender my soul. But I chose by desire to surrender that seat in me that then opened up, once all this stuff got dealt with, that I could truly know where I was seated in the realms of heaven and begin to function there from a place of rest, in a totally different way than I was doing before. So, I guess you're in a place where, some of those sort of things are happening, but I would just go for it,
Well, I think too, for me, my personal life, my circumstances dictated such a death to self there, and having to give up control. And I mean, I had a 28-year marriage die 7 years ago, and autism ravaging, every ounce of your life. And I really, this complete surrender there was forced. It was that, or, I don't know, prescription medication or something, I don't know. But God met me there. And I mean, from a personal standpoint, he is everything and all things. And I didn't have to deconstruct religion. I've had to deconstruct the world mindset. So when it came to the vision that he gave me, I think, my propensity was to create the Ishmael, go ahead and handle it. And so there's been so much I haven't let go. I mean, hearing what you're talking about right there, it's just, I see that's what I haven't released. He gave me a vision in 2006, a blueprint. I didn't know that's what it was at the time. And I didn't care about anybody or anything at that point, but my own, hell I was living in. And out of that, actually it was 2011, he started to bring his people into it. But still, I haven't released it. And I have this thing, because it affects other people, and we're trying to interconnect, and it's just a lot bigger. I could do the island by myself with God and be perfectly okay. In fact, I was thinking monastery or something would be really good. I could go there, but he's kicked me out here, and this is where he wants me to kill me a little bit more. But that really helped me a lot, because that's what I haven't done. I haven't let go there of the world mindset of what that's supposed to look like. Yeah. And it's not, and he's giving me those glimpses of this interdimensional kingdom that he wants to just, establish, but I have to let go of those. My pillars are not, they are of the mind, but they're more of a worldly than a religion. So, but thank you. That was very helpful. Very, very, very helpful.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I had three non-religious pillars. One was scientific rationalism, one was cultural relativity, I think, and the other one was humanism. So I did have three of them, but they were so enmeshed with sort of the religious stuff that they just worked themselves out through religious stuff, even though they were DIY stuff. You know, it's just how it was, you know. But you know, everyone's different and everyone's journey is different. But I do believe if we don't get to that point of, you know, total yielding, surrender, whatever you want to call it.
Well, it's like you were saying, until you let go, he can't give you the fullness of that.
No.
It won't mix.
No, it doesn't.
You know, and he's giving you glimpses to say, hey, this way. But and it is. And I had some things I've got to walk through to let that happen, to allow that to happen. And it's just permission, really, just giving God permission.
Yeah.
To deconstruct and destroy with trust.
and that's what really I discovered, you know. I was trusting in my own way, but I wasn't absolutely trusting, because I was trusting when I knew, not when I didn't know, you know.
He so established that to me in my own life, though, because when I did finally let go, and like I said, it was really not an option. I died, you know, it was dead. But he has taken care of me in ways, it is just, the last 7 years I have been blessed beyond measure. Trust isn't an issue there, but why that's not translating into the other, you know, is I got to figure out why that isn't happening, and ask him there to help me there. So.
Okay. Awesome. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I'll leave